FICRA for Studies and Development, FICRA SD, is an independent, nonpartisan Sudanese research center and policy organization dedicated to advancing peace, progress, and knowledge, promoting democratic transformation, and supporting sustainable development in Sudan and the wider region. Sudanese Dialogues is the signature podcast from FICRA SD, brings you in-depth analysis and sharp insight into Sudan's latest developments and unfolding dynamics. Welcome to a brand new episode of Sudanese Dialogues. Let's dive in.
Today, we're breaking down an urgent and, frankly, harrowing report from FICRA for Studies and Development about the crisis that's unfolding right now in Fasher, Sudan.
So, the report kicks things off with this one single massive number, 1 million. And let's be clear, that's not just a statistic. That's 1 million people, 1 million human beings currently trapped at the absolute center of this catastrophe.
And that's the reality behind the number, right? We're talking about almost 1 million civilians who are trapped inside Fasher, the capital of North Darfur. They can't get out, and essential supplies can't get in. And you know, that kind of isolation, it has a devastating human cost, especially for the kids. The report cites UN data, and it's just brutal. Get this, nearly half of all children under the age of 5 are acutely malnourished, and within that group, a shocking 11% are facing severe acute malnutrition. That is the most life-threatening kind of hunger there is.
So how did we get here? What's actually happening on the ground? Well, the report details this absolutely brutal siege that kicked off back in May 2024, and it's just been tightening its grip on the city ever since.
And the report points the finger directly at one group enforcing this siege, the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. They have, for all intents and purposes, completely cut the city off from the rest of the world. No food, no medicine, no aid, nothing gets in to help the people trapped inside.
Now, this is a really crucial point the report makes. This situation isn't just some tragic side effect of a conflict. No, it argues this is a deliberate strategy. This is not a natural disaster. It's a man-made one.
And there's a specific term the FICRA report uses for this tactic, and it's chilling. They call it engineered starvation. It's exactly what it sounds like. The deliberate, calculated use of famine as a weapon of war to achieve a political or a military goal.
And look, they don't just throw that term out there. The report lays out some pretty stark evidence to back this up. Aid from the World Food Program, it's been blocked for over a year. Any humanitarian convoys that even try to get through, they're attacked or looted. Inside the city, things are so bad that families are reportedly eating animal fodder. And maybe the most chilling detail of all, the nearby Zamzam camp, which was once a refuge for 500,000 displaced people, has apparently been converted into an RSF military base.
So this whole strategy is being enforced by a very real, physical structure on the ground. The report goes into a lot of detail about it, and the name they use for it is, well, it's pretty chilling.
Yeah, analysts cited in the report actually use a military term for this whole setup, a kill box. And what that means is this whole network of physical barriers they've built around Fasher. It's been designed, purpose-built, to trap the civilian population inside and to control absolutely everything that moves in or out.
And we're not talking about a small fence here. The scale of this thing is just immense. Satellite imagery analysis shows the RSF have built over 31 kilometers of these earthen barriers. They've literally walled the city in. And these aren't just random walls. The report makes it clear this is a meticulous, carefully designed system. It's a trap. These barriers, these berms, they do a bunch of things at once. They choke off all the supply routes, they stop civilians from being able to flee, and they create perfect ambush points for any aid convoys that might try their luck. It's a complete, interlocking system of control.
So you might be asking, has anything been done to stop this? Well, the report basically outlines a whole series of failures, both diplomatic and humanitarian, that have just left the people of Fasher completely stranded.
Okay, so let's look at the timeline. Diplomacy, it's pretty much hit a brick wall. Back in June 2025, the UN proposed a humanitarian truce. The Sudanese government said yes, but according to the report, the RSF just flat out rejected it. Then in August, you have Sudan's prime minister sending this urgent letter to the UN demanding action, and that basically brings us to today and this new call for airdrops.
Okay, but hold on. Why not just get the civilians out of there? I mean, it sounds like the most logical solution, right? Evacuate them. But the report argues, pretty forcefully, that this would actually be a deeply flawed and incredibly dangerous idea, a disaster in its own right.
And when you put the two main options side by side, the contrast is, well, it's stark. On one hand, you have a forced evacuation. The report says that would basically make the international community an accomplice in the RSF's agenda. It would expose fleeing civilians to the risk of being targeted based on their ethnicity, and it normalizes using starvation as a weapon of war. But on the other hand, you have airdrops. They bypass the siege entirely, getting aid directly to the people who need it and, sustaining life inside the city.
So all of this, it leads us right to the central argument of the entire report. You've got all these other avenues blocked off. Evacuation is seen as this really dangerous alternative. So what's left? The report says there's only one viable path forward.
Airdrops. Simple as that. The FICRA report is absolutely clear on this. This isn't a last resort anymore. They're arguing that at this point, airdrops are the only option left to fulfill the world's responsibility to protect these civilians.
And to really drive this home, the report highlights this powerful quote from Sudan's prime minister from that letter back in August 2025. This is a moral test for the international community. And that really reframes the whole crisis, doesn't it? It's not just a logistical problem to solve, it's a fundamental moral test.
And they're not just being vague about it either. The report gets really specific with its proposals. It's calling for an immediate and sustained aerial bridge, delivering no less than 4,700 metric tons of essential supplies every week. And this is a really crucial piece, they're also calling for targeted sanctions on any outside groups that are supplying the RSF with the anti-aircraft weapons that could threaten these life-saving missions.
So as we get to the end here, the report doesn't really finish with a plea. It's more of a stark warning about what happens if we continue to hesitate, and what that means for all of us.
And the conclusion is a heavy one. The report argues that allowing this man-made famine to just continue, it doesn't just prolong the suffering in Fasher, it emboldens anyone, anywhere in the world who might think about using starvation as a weapon. It sets an incredibly dangerous precedent for the future.
Which really leaves us all with the question that the report itself poses. You're faced with a siege, an engineered famine, and what it calls a preventable tragedy. So the question is, what is the true cost of hesitation?